Trans people make up roughly 1% of the American population, yet they became a flashpoint for Republicans' attacks during this election cycle. According to data from the ad tracking firm Ad Impact, Republicans up and down the ballot spent at least $215 million on anti-trans ads. 26 states have passed some kind of ban on gender-affirming care for minors. According to the Williams Institute at UCLA's law school, more than 113,000 trans and gender nonconforming minors live in states with those bans. In the last 2 years, states have passed more than 100 laws targeting LGBTQ+ rights, many of them limiting or banning trans health care for minors, banning trans kids from playing sports, and prohibiting LGBTQ+ lessons in schools. And some states have taken steps to limit the rights of trans adults as well. Donald Trump himself has signaled that he will take measures against trans people, regardless of age, on his very first day in office. Last year, he said, quote, "On day one, I will sign an executive order instructing every federal agency to cease the promotion of sex or gender transition at any age. They're not going to do it anymore." Lawmakers in some conservative states, like Arkansas, Florida, Kansas, and Texas, have filed bills aimed at trans adults, pushing bills that would restrict bathroom use, gender markers on official documents, and funding for gender-affirming care. Just last month, after Sarah McBride became the first openly trans person to be elected to Congress, Republican Congresswoman from South Carolina, Nancy Mace, introduced a bill that would ban trans women from using the women's bathrooms on Capitol Hill. Mace confirmed that she introduced the bill to target her new colleague, Congresswoman McBride. While there are a lot of unknowns, trans advocates anticipate that the incoming Trump administration will significantly roll back protections that trans people have increasingly come to rely on for health care and other protections. And this summer, Trump's campaign doubled down on a plan to prevent trans health care from being covered by Medicare or Medicaid. With just a few weeks left until Inauguration Day, 5 to be exact, trans folks across the country are taking protective measures, attempting to prepare themselves for what is likely to come. Grassroots organizers and LGBTQ rights and legal groups, even community organizers in bars and on social media, are working to help trans folks before January 20th. They're sorting out how to maintain access to hormone therapy and other necessary medical treatment, and they're ensuring that official documentation shows the correct gender marker of the bearer. All of these steps require time, money, and know-how, but they are vital steps for the trans community to protect itself and to live in dignity and in safety. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Imara Jones, the award-winning journalist and the founder and CEO of Translash Media and the host of the award-winning Translash podcast. Imara, thank you for being here. Let's get into it. There are about 5 weeks until Donald Trump is inaugurated for the second time. How are trans folks preparing themselves for Trump's second run at office?
Well, thanks for having me. I think that your setup framed it extremely well in terms of the range of things that people are thinking about and the emphasis on communities and organizing themselves. One of the most interesting things here is the way in which trans elders are actually helping to inform the actions of younger people who may not have lived during a time when there were outright bans on a whole host of things and services that trans people need and expressions of identity. And so that's also an interesting thing, such as how to form care networks, for example. So people are very much focused on the next 5 weeks. I don't think that there are very many people who are delusional about what is about to happen, and everyone's focused on doing what they can to prepare for the tsunami that's about to hit.
Well, one aspect of this tsunami is going to roll over the United States Supreme Court. About 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court heard oral argument in a case called United States versus Skrmetti. And that case basically asked whether or not trans individuals would be covered or protected by the Equal Protection Clause. Why should individuals outside of the LGBTQ+ community care about this case? What are the larger implications of this case for all of us?
Well, I always thought that the implications were huge going in, but actually sitting in the chamber and hearing the justices sort of game out all of the ways in which they were trying to make the law fit and not damage anything else, I think it's more wide-ranging than I even thought. So first of all is the Equal Protection Clause, which, as you know, has been in the sights of conservatives for at least 4 decades now, wanting to take away the right and limit the right for people to be treated equally under the law. So any diminution of that is a diminution for everyone. Changing the way in which gender expansively has been included under the Equal Protection Clause to maybe limit it more along biological sex, which would be very damaging for a whole host of things, including job discrimination for cis women and a whole host of other things.
Right.
But it touches parental rights. It touches perhaps interracial marriage. It touches the use of science and pseudoscience and laws, abortion rights, like the list of things, whether or not the court will assert itself in any case that involves so-called science or medicine. That was one of the other things that was debated. So I think it's pretty wide-ranging.
Yeah. So one issue that was not on the table for the court was the question of parental rights. The court explicitly did not take up that question. But just last week, the court denied certiorari, refused to review a case coming out of Wisconsin where parents challenged a school policy to support trans youth. Interestingly, the court said it wouldn't take it. It said that these particular plaintiffs did not have standing to bring the suit, but 3 justices noted their objections to that denial of certiorari. So Brett Kavanaugh did not actually write a writing, but said that he would have granted the case. But Justices Alito and Thomas both signed on to a writing that essentially said that they thought that parents had the fundamental right to direct the raising of their children in the manner of their choosing, and that included objecting to support for trans care. What do you make of that, given just a week earlier, these 2 individuals seemed incredibly skeptical of parents' rights to bring their children forward for gender-affirming care? Well,
I think it just underscores the smorgasbord approach to the law of this court, right? It's not about following precedent. It's not about establishing predictability. It's very much however they seem to want to rule in a case, they decide to cherry pick and put together whatever specific arguments allow them to do that. And so, as you say, I mean, Amy Coney Barrett had to say several times that Skrmetti, if they affirmed the Sixth Circuit, was not going to impact parental rights, because everyone knows that it would, it should on the face of the law, right? And so on this, they are saying that it doesn't. And it's just because this court, again, it's a smorgasbord approach to the law, which I think is one of the things that is undermining and diminishing the credibility of the court.
And the protections for all people.
The protections. And also, whenever you approach the law, I don't even know how lawyers do this now. It's very hard to figure out which case law, which precedents, which rulings are going to apply, because, the district court in Skrmetti said, just a Trump-reported lawyer, just on the law alone, that the Tennessee ruling and the Tennessee law shouldn't stand.
Right.
The district court totally ignored that and made up a different standard and said, we're doing something new here, and so, this is fine. And I think that the problem here is that there's no consistency in the law now. And they're literally making it up as they go along. All
right. Amara Jones, that is sobering news. Thank you so much for joining us.